Rebecca.
Hello, Chris.
Yeah, yeah. Good to have you on. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I know you're very busy, and so again, I appreciate you spending some time to talk about your career throughout film. But before we start with that, because I know people probably know you as a film producer, especially with Ken Loach and I, Daniel Blake, and Michelle Barley, and all those great films. But in terms of the start of your career, correct me if I'm wrong, been doing my research, you actually started in, was it theatre? Is that correct?
Well, it depends on where you start, really,
Uh,
because my first job in film was actually working at the Edinburgh Film Festival back in the late 1970s. I worked there for 3 summers, as a sort of summer job, and that really got me hooked into movies in the first place. And my first proper job after leaving uni was working at Riverside Studios in the theatre. But it was like Riverside was a sort of art centre,
mhm.
and it still is now. It's reopened as an art centre. So the job was more organising the program of bringing in theatre, film, music, art, all sorts of artistic endeavors into the site. The actual theatre stuff was being done. I wasn't actually involved directly in the shows that we were putting on, but I was there helping organize getting artists into the building, as it were, with David Gothard, who was the artistic director then. So yeah, I did that, and I worked in the press office. So I had various bits of relevant
Okay.
training, and then I did a 1 week film production course, and that was it. That was like, this is what I have to do. And so,
Yeah, yeah.
when I did that little course, which I saw, it was like an ad in the newspaper. And once I'd done that, I thought, yeah, that's that. This is the job for me. Got to be in film.
Cool. So just going back quickly before we move forward, going back to when you were at the Edinburgh Film Festival, how long did you work there for, and what specifically were your duties while working for the festival?
Okay, I was just working as a sort of assistant. I helped edit the program, and because when you're organizing a film festival, every film has to have something written about it.
Yeah.
And Ellen Galford was the editor, but assisted her, and then basically I did publicity, really. Worked on publicity, and it was, a very homespun event. There weren't it was the festival then was quite small compared to what festivals are like now, but then there weren't that many film festivals at the time. It was a long running film festival and run by Linda Miles then. And so there were sort of, I don't know, maybe 10 of us running a film festival. And so I was involved in lots of stuff, but primarily helping with the program, doing publicity, um, introducing filmmakers to audiences, things like that.
Okay, cool. So you did that, and then you moved into a theatre. Again, from doing my research, you seem to have a great love of theatre. I think particularly musicals. I think, is that correct? That was one of your favourite styles of plays.
You've done your research. I mean, I mean, as a kid, we used to go and see the film musicals every year, the big musicals in the cinema. I mean, that's that was just me as a kid growing up in Scotland. You get to see the big, go to the big movie house and see the big musical every year. There would be something like The Sound of Music, or um, I don't know, Mary Poppins, all that lot.
Oh, okay, okay. Any particular favourites that you had?
Um, Particularly liked, I loved South Pacific, and I loved Oklahoma. Those were good ones. And but Mary Poppins as well. Very definitely.
Okay, okay. See, I like theatre, but musicals is something which kind of everything's serious, and then you go into song and stuff. Maybe it's my stuffy personality, I don't know, but I'm not into musicals. Although I do remember a few years ago went to see The Colour Purple because it turned it into a musical.
Yeah,
And I think that was more a curiosity because I've read the book and I watched the film and I like both, but they're both very dark material. And so I was thinking, how on earth are you going to make this into a musical? So, and I have to say, they pulled it off very well,
yeah.
considering the subject matter.
I mean, if you think of something like West Side Story, which is amazing, I mean, actually, that's probably the best of that lot. I mean, that is an incredible piece of work because the dancing is so good and the music, the songs are so good. It's just a very, it's like, you know, it's a very passionate piece, and the colors are so good. It's just a really good all-round entertainment, something like that, you know. And I think that's what you were looking for. It's pure escapism, but and wonderfully romantic stuff. I mean, I've never seen anything as good as the musicals of the 50s and 60s. I don't think I've seen anything. I mean, you know, for me, something like Wicked doesn't cut the mustard, you know, it just doesn't. These are brilliantly written musicals with great lyrics, which you can hear, and you know, very magical and entertaining for young people, I thought. And so yeah, I found them fantastic to watch when I was a kid.
One thing I will say about musicals, appreciating it, and I'll say this after, and I put myself through it, watching Singing in the Rain, and there's a sequence with Gene Kelly, and is it Donald O'Connor, I think, or
Donald O'Connor, yes,
yeah,
absolutely amazing.
yeah, how athletic they are, like
Oh,
especially Donald O'Connor, he's just so athletic, and the balance and how I'm just wherever I think of musicals, I do respect that, like to do that and then sing,
oh, it's incredible. I mean, you know, the dancing skills are, I mean, with Gene Kelly and Frank O'Connor and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, they were all brilliant. And to have those sort of perfect skills, I mean, it must have taken. And you look at the takes, how long some of the takes are in those things, absolutely incredible. So yeah, I have a soft spot for them. I mean, it's not it's not all I like, of course,
yeah,
but
yeah,
as a
yeah.
kid, as a kid, you know, going to the movies and seeing something spectacular
Yeah.
like that, or you know, Mary Poppins was amazing because it was the first film where they combined live action with animation,
Hmm.
and so it was absolutely magical, you know, really special to see something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the lyrics and the songs are fantastic. I mean, there's songs we all know. You know, you probably know half the songs from Mary Poppins.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's weird because I've certainly Easter, Good Friday and whatnot. Every time the Sound of Music was on, and my mum would put that on, and it'd be that, and Grease as well. And as much as I recognize the songs, it's like I've seen them so many times because of that. You get to a point of weariness and thinking, yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, exactly. You've overwatched them, and exactly that they get boring. But seeing them for the first time on a big screen and the cinemas where when I grew up were big screens. You know, you go into the main screen and it would be huge and it would be like a real adventure. You know, none of this sort of pocket-sized stuff. I mean, obviously now the quality is really good and all the rest of it, but these were big cinema screens and just an exciting thing to do.
yeah.
But I mean, by the time I got to work at the Edinburgh Film Festival, there were we were watching. I mean, you know, it was sort of big European films, but we would also have a few blockbusters to have special galas for.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I think we opened one festival with Alien, the first
Oh, okay.
Alien screening. And then, you know, while I was there, we basically discovered David Lynch. We showed Eraserhead, which we received out of the blue. So it was really exciting being there, showing very interesting new filmmakers.
Well, again, I heard another interview while doing my research that in regards to films you liked, is it true that you're a fan of like the Czech New Wave? Was that one of the stars of films that you were particularly a fan of?
It's more that's more a Ken Loach thing than me.
Okay.
I mean, I do. I absolutely appreciate the Czech New Wave, and I think that they're very interesting films, but that's more where Ken came from than I did.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So talking earlier, obviously through your love of musicals and how you were smiling, then you had a real love for theatre, but then you decided to leave the theatre for Pastors New. What made you decide to that your career wasn't in theatre?
I never, I mean, no, I never really was, I never really wanted a career in theatre. I think that's not quite right. I didn't want to have a career in theatre. I just liked going to the theatre. I was very lucky when I was at school doing my A levels. We had very enlightened English teachers who took us to a lot of shows. I was in London at the time, and we got to see a lot of shows. We got good deals, and we got to see, like, we were going to, like, I don't know, maybe 10 shows a year for a couple of years. So I saw a lot of theatre, and I really liked it, but I was always a film person, from the beginning. I loved going to the movies, and um that was my thing, definitely. I was interested in film more than theatre. So I didn't switch. I just found a way in, because I had no idea that I could actually have a job in film. It just wasn't something that I'd even dreamt of at when I was growing up. It just never occurred to me that, and I thought, well, maybe the job's a thing, again, um, there hadn't been so much of a breakthrough for women at the time, and I think I assumed that the jobs would be script supervisor or costume or something like that. I didn't know that the job of producer existed, and it was when I went and did that 1 week film production course that I discovered that you need somebody to organize everything, and that those are my skills, organizational skills. So when I discovered that you needed somebody to get the show on the road, that's where I thought, yes, that's for me. That I can do that.
Cool. And from there, didn't you go into children's television, or was that just before?
Yeah, I did 2 years, and I think I sort of call it my apprenticeship, really. I did 2 years working on what was commission number 3 at Channel 4, which was a multicultural kids magazine program that had been devised by the kids poet Michael Rosen
Okay.
and a company called Telecation, and it was literally the third commission at the new Channel 4. And the idea was to you know tell kids stories and go and visit kids in their different worlds, and particularly focus on the sort of new multicultural Britain. And that was amazing. And we did it was sort of documentary, little bits of documentary with kids, and like playing non-competitive games, and we did we got well-known actors to tell stories. We filmed, we had Michael Rosen played a character called Dr. Smarty Pants. It was really stupid. And we just worked our way around the country. We went to Northern Ireland, we went to Liverpool when the Toxteth riots were going on. We went to places where other people weren't necessarily going, and we went to schools where there were real mixed communities, and we filmed with real kids. And it was a sort of, I suppose, like a sort of antidote to Blue Peter. It was like, this is how kids really are. And we filmed in Coventry and Birmingham, where you're from, and Newcastle, we went around the country. And the other thing we did, which was, I think, quite unusual, was we made sure that our little crew was multicultural too. So we were always looking to go out with a mixed crew, this is in the early 80s, so that was pretty good. And and it was interesting because throughout the 80s, everything that I did was about diversity, but we weren't even calling it diversity then. It was just that's what we were doing, really.
Yeah. Again, it's especially for the 80s. Again, what you're saying, what you did sounded very unusual in that respect. I mean, you almost compared it as a temporary to Blue Peter, but from what you're saying, you're almost saying like a contemporary to something like Newsround, which was obviously telling the news, but obviously seemed.
Yeah, it was more like a fun show. It was more like, okay, let's take something like yogurt, for instance, and let's see how different cultures make it. And we go to a Turkish kid's house and watch how they make whatever they make. And then we go to a Hindu girl's house and have a look and see how she made lassi. And so it was like working with real kids and looking into their worlds so that they could see themselves on the screen rather than always seeing, rather I mean, not to knock Blue Peter because I grew up with it and it was good fun, but it's like always presented like, in a slightly patronizing way, whereas
Yeah,
this was actually going around with real kids and finding out what they wanted to know. And so we got some great people to do stories for us. Remember doing a story with Bob Hoskins in the underground, and it was a story about a giant underground flea. And then we did something with Miriam Margolyes. I can't remember what her story was. Some Jewish, some sort of Yiddish story. It was really, really good. And like each episode was like maybe 6 or 7 different items. So it
yeah,
was a magazine program,
yeah.
and we made 30 programs over the course of a couple of years. And so that was an incredible apprenticeship.
I can imagine so because the names you mentioned there, like Bob Hoskins, for instance, to try and get him, because I think that would have been well, just before Mona Lisa, well, just after Good Friday.
It was
Um,
after Long Good Friday, but the company that I was working with was a company called Telecation, and one of the people who ran Telecation was Barry Hansen, and it was his wife Susanna who was the main producer,
okay.
and Barry produced the Long Good Friday. So we had some access, and we had through Michael Rosen we had some access. So we asked people to do stuff.
Okay. Okay. So you do that for 2 years, and then you went on to become, correct me if I'm wrong, a location manager on My Beautiful Laundrette.
Well, I did. I actually worked as a production manager on a couple of films before that. I
Hmm.
mean, it was sort of still early days in terms of the freelance world, and so it was relatively easy to get into those roles because there weren't that many. Because a lot of people were working for either studios or working for TV companies, and the freelance thing only just started. And so I started off as a freelancer, so there was a demand for people. So I got in quite early on as a production manager, and then you chop and change. And so occasionally I did a few jobs as a location manager, including My Beautiful Laundrette, which I got because I met Hanif Qureshi at Riverside Studios, where we put on his first play. So I
Okay.
knew Hanif. So that's sort of how I got that particular job. And it was a smallish world, really, making small independent films for Film 4. And it was working titles first film, and so I got to know that particular gang. And yeah, we a small world, but we all sort of grew up together.
Yeah, yeah. Considering how controversial that film, I think, must have been, especially in the 80s, and I'll talk about this with regards to your work with Ken Loach later on, but how hard would it have been to produce a film like that in terms of getting funding, getting organized? Because I imagine most certain people didn't want to be associated with it because of the subject matter.
No, not the case at all, because it was
Okay.
Channel 4, and Channel 4's remit was to be controversial and was to do new, groundbreaking stuff. And unlike today, where you have to get money from all sorts of places, Channel 4 was one-stop shopping. You could get all the money to make that film. We
Mhm.
made it for, I don't know, we made it for under $1 million, um and it was, you know, a smallish crew, and we just got on with it. And it was like, we knew we were doing something groundbreaking, but Channel 4 were behind it all the way, and they commissioned it, and they got the credit for it as well. So it was 100% Channel 4. And that's what that's what Film 4 was. It was taking the tradition of doing films for TV and making them for the cinema in a small way, but it was the beginning of the UK independent industry.
Yeah, indeed. So from there, you're working on that film. Where did you go from there with regards to your career?
Well, I just did. I sort of worked my way up as a production manager, and I did another of Hanif's films with Stephen Frears directing, which was called Sammy and Rosie Get Laid, which wasn't so good. But I also did I production managed a musical, funnily enough, it was a TV series called Upline, which was a sort of a musical set in Soho. That was Channel 4 as well, and had some quite well-known actors in it. It had people like Peter Capaldi and Hugh Laurie, all young actors at the time.
Mm.
Um, uh, Gosh, trying to remember the names, but there were some well-known actors in that, and crazy thing running around Soho doing a musical, just in on location, everything. And that was, and I did another film with the first one I did of this lot was a film called Sacred Hearts with a female director, and it was an all-women crew as much as we could. So, you know, we were doing groundbreaking stuff, and I did a series of documentaries about gay people. We did about 3 men and 3 women, and they were all documentaries, and so I production managed that. So I just did lots of different things, and eventually, and I'd worked on a film called Crystal Gazing with Peter Wallen and Laura Mulvey, and Peter asked me if I would produce his film Friendship's Death. And so that was the first film that I actually produced. And that starred Tilda Swinton, and that we got the money from the BFI and Channel 4. And so that was the first, it was a little film. It was like a tiny film, and we made it for under 200,000, and we shot it in a studio for 2 weeks because it was like a two-hander. It was Tilda and Bill Patterson, who's a great actor, doing it's a sort of two-hander. It's a story set in Amman, Jordan, during Black September. And Bill plays a journalist who's covering the troubles for a UK newspaper, and he meets this sort of Western looking woman on the streets of Amman, and she's not obeying the curfew. So he sort of takes her under his wing and brings her into his hotel, and over a course of 2 weeks they have these conversations, and you begin to realize that she's actually an alien. So Tilda playing an alien was the first film I produced. But it's a beautiful film, and it was actually a couple of years ago, the Cannes Film Festival chose it as a Cannes classic. So it actually played at Cannes a couple of years ago, which was amazing. It's really a great honor to have my first film up there at Cannes.
Yeah.
So having produced that, having done that film with Peter Wallen, I was a producer, and the working title people, because I knew them really well, I'd done quite a bit of stuff with them, because they now knew somebody, you know, the same vintage who was also a producer. They asked me if I would produce a TV series for them in Ireland. So I did, and that was a book by Maeve Binchy, set in a seaside town in Ireland. So I worked on that. And so I produced that. Basically, I wasn't raising the money for these things. I was just producer for hire, really. I was hired to get the thing made. And so I went to Ireland and did that for Working Title. And then when I got back, of course, I was then Working Title's Irish expert. And they were doing a film with Ken Loach in Ireland.
Yeah.
So it made sense to put me with Ken because I had the Irish experience. So that's how I ended up working with Ken, through Working Title. But actually, that film didn't happen. The film that I was going to do with Ken didn't happen because he and the writer didn't really see eye to eye, and I don't think they really wanted to make the same film. So the film that Ken wanted to make really wasn't the film that Working Title wanted to make. So we ended up about 4 weeks away from shooting, not without a film to make. So, and then Ken said we'd actually got on really well. And I mean, I was a huge fan of Ken's. I'd really loved his work, his early work when I was growing up. I really was a big fan. And so I was really thrilled to be working with him. And he said, we just got on very well. And he said, I've got another script. Would I be interested in trying to get that off the ground? And of course I did. Of course I wanted to do that. So Jim Allen, who'd written this script about the Irish Troubles, yeah, it was called The Heel of the Hunt. Anyway, that ultimately it took us quite a long time to get it off the ground. It took us, I think, 2.5 years or something, but that became Hidden Agenda. I needed to get another producer to work with me because I hadn't got the experience raising funding. But I found Eric Fellner in Soho, and Eric came on board and helped get the money together for that. So we produced that together, and yeah, so that was my first film with Ken.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because Ken, that film brought him back in a big way. Because I think in the 80s, I know he directed a few adverts, but he'd been a bit of the wilderness. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, his previous producer, Tony Garnett, left him sort of at the end of the 70s, and he moved to Hollywood. He wanted to direct himself.
Mhm.
So Tony left, and then he didn't really have a producer, and Ken tried to get a few documentaries off the ground, and he kept on being too controversial or too political, and they didn't get broadcast. And so and he made a film which he wasn't that happy with as well in the middle of the 80s, and couldn't really get traction. And so by the time we made Hidden Agenda, yeah, he was doing commercials to make a living. And actually, while we were trying to get the money together for Hidden Agenda, he got me jobs as a location manager on some of the commercials, which was great because I needed the bread as well. Anyway, we did manage to get the funding for Hidden Agenda, which was difficult because it was very controversial, because it does tackle some really sore wounds, regarding the Troubles. But we did get it together, and we managed to get funding from a very strange source with a guy called John Daly, who had a company called Hemdale. And they came on board. In the end, the public funders like the script. They thought it was good, but then then when it got up to the sort of top echelons, it was turned down because it was too much like a hot potato. It was too political. It was because we were saying that there was basically a shoot to kill policy in Ireland, which in fact there was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And everything, the three premises that the film discusses were all later proved to be true. during the 90s, which is extraordinary. So we made that film, and it was difficult to make, but it was really a triumph, actually. And we went to Cannes with it, and we had this extraordinary press conference where the British press attacked us like crazy, or they attacked Ken, not me. But and the British critics were outraged by what, by our claims against the British government in the film. And the foreign press couldn't understand what on earth was going on. But anyway, we won the jury prize for that film, and it put Ken back on the map. And the film was shown in the States, and it starred a young Frances McDormand
Yeah.
and Brian Cox, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's still going?
Yeah. Yeah. Doing very well for themselves. Yeah.
They're doing fine. So yeah, it was an extraordinary experience making the film, because also the completion guarantors didn't want us to shoot in Belfast until we'd shot all the main scenes. So we shot half of it here in the UK, and then we shot. We went to Belfast to shoot the last couple of weeks, and we reshot scenes that we couldn't. We weren't. We wanted to shoot there. So yeah, it was amazing.
How risky was it actually filming in Belfast, especially at that time?
Well, it was sort of scary because I guess difficult to know really. I mean, we knew people. Some of our contacts were members of Sinn Féin, and so I guess we were sort of. I mean, I don't know how people would have attacked us. I mean, what did happen? I mean, we weren't, as it were, under threat from the IRA, because we were basically, telling stories much more against what the British government had been doing.
Yeah.
So in a way, and it's not like the British government can really be seen to be turning us down or refusing us. The best way they could deal with us was by ignoring us. But we did have this rather scary incident where at the end of the shoot, I got a phone call from our assistant director saying there's some police in the hotel lobby and they want to meet you and Ken. And I thought, since this is the last night before we were going to wrap, I thought, oh yeah, this is a wind up. So went downstairs, got Ken, and there were these two senior people from the RUC, the press guy and somebody else, and they took us into a private room, and they started off by telling us that we had been doing some dangerous driving on the streets because we were operating a low loader, but we had permission for that, and but it was really an excuse for them to say. And they then turned the conversation into, you are wrong. Your script is wrong. We're just putting you on notice that we think that you are wrong in what you're making. And it was sort of terrifying. But they'd been drinking as well. You could smell the drink on their breath, and you thought, oh my God, they just wanted to have a go at us. And so we were, the following day, we seemed to have a helicopter above us all day. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't related, but because that's what happened in Belfast all the time. But it was sort of scary. And there was a major incident going on. There was somebody escaped from the jail, and it was like, I have never been happier to get out of somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting on the plane that night with the rushes. Oh God. So it was sort of scary. But, we were shaking after that incident with the RUC. It was weird, but it was also, I'm very proud of that film because it was amazing to get it done, really, given the circumstances. And we shot the Orange Marches as well, so it was
Really, really good time. But one thing I was going to ask you actually, because obviously that was about the shooting policy in Northern Ireland, but you produced The Wing That Shakes the Barley as well, which again is about Irish and Irish independence, Irish Civil War. was it compared to what happened on Hidden Agenda? What was a reception you had on that Windy Shakes of Barley? Because it's still same country, but obviously slightly different times.
Well, interesting. It was very interesting how, we thought, I mean, The Wind That Shakes the Barley is about an earlier period. It's about the, first of all, about the War of Independence and then leading into the Civil War.
Hmm.
Um, and the War of Independence was when, the British soldiers who were sent to tidy up Ireland, basically,
Hmm.
had come straight from the First World War and were traumatized. And so these black and tans, as they were known,
Hmm.
were very brutal because they'd been traumatized by another war, and they were basically sent to wipe out the IRA. And but it evolved into the Civil War. So when there was a peace when there was a peace deal, the Irish split into different factions because some of them agreed with the peace deal, some didn't, some wanted more, some wanted less. So that's what the film is about. But what happened, and it pitted brother against brother, and that's the story of The Wind That Shakes the Barley. And we sort of represent the different attitudes to the Civil War through different characters in the film and debates. But what happened when we took the film to Cannes, was we were really quite surprised, and I was certainly surprised that, again, some of the critics, were saying things like, why does Ken Loach hate his country so much?
Yeah.
But we're just telling you a bit of history. We are not a perfect country. We have blood on our hands. We've had a colonialist past. We started with Ireland. Ireland
Yeah.
was the colony, and we started that. The British started that. So, you don't learn how to be better citizens unless you understand your own history and your country's history. So, that was the story we were telling. But it really surprised me that, 15 years after making The Wind That Shakes, the 15 years after making Hidden Agenda, people were still making a fuss about the fact that we were being unpatriotic by telling that story. But
Mhm.
actually, what was really funny was that the headline, that the remarks about the film in the Sun in England were very derogatory, but the same newspaper in Ireland was cock a hoop because we won the Palme d'Or, and
Yeah,
it was like, hang on, this is the same paper.
yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah.
was interesting.
Very bizarre, very bizarre. And you kind of mentioned Francis McDormand in A Hidden Agenda, and that's one thing I noticed with the films you, Ken, and Paul Laverty, whose writing I actually admire a lot. I think he's a brilliant screenwriter. But the research you do in these films just comes out in the on screen as well. I mean, how long does research take, or does it vary from film to film?
Varies from film to film, but certainly, I mean, Hidden Agenda was written by Jim Allen, not Paul, but it's the same process. And he knew a lot about Ireland anyway. I mean, he's an Irish background, but you know, in both Jim and Paul would really do a huge amount of research before even writing the script. So they would read a lot, they would interview people. I mean, you look at Paul's research is amazing. I mean, he would have, for The Wind That Shakes the Barley, he read everything. But we also had the very good Irish professor at the University of Cork who became our main advisor, a guy called Donal O'Driscoll. And so he really knew that history very, very well. And so he helped Paul find the right materials. But also, there were still a few people whose grandparents had been in the Civil War. So there were people to interview. There were people, but with every film, there was always I don't know, 6 months, a year's worth of research that would go on by Paul or Jim or whoever before they even put pen to paper.
Yeah, I mean, just think of I, Daniel Blake, for instance. I wasn't on benefits then, but I knew friends of mine that were. I had chronic conditions. So but they were telling me, even before I saw the film, I knew a lot from them, and I'd actually helped people say, this is how you get through the assessments.
Yeah,
And you could, when I watched that film, my jaw dropped, like how well researched it was. There were some moments of levity there, like when Daniel tries to use a computer, for example. That is funny, which were needed. But overall, I think it was a stunning piece of work. Incredible. And actually, the young actress in there, Hayley Squires, is another really well actress who I think gone on to do really well for herself.
yeah.
It seems to be a theme as well with you and Ken as well. Like Frances McDormand, Adrian Brody as well. I know Cia Murphy was after done 28 days later, but again, where do you find these like actors and actors from to do
Well,
this?
they've got to be right for the part. I mean, with Ken, you know, with The Wind That Shakes the Barley, it was just a huge help that Killian was from Cork, where we were going to make the film.
Mhm.
And he wouldn't have got the part if he hadn't been from Cork.
Mm.
So he had the accent, and also, but he was, I mean, the thing is also, Ken is well known amongst actors of being a great director. So we could get actors if we wanted them, but normally we weren't looking for famous actors, we're looking for the right actor. So
Yeah,
an awful lot of people have been, and like Peter Mullen, for instance,
yeah.
he had a small role in Riff Raff, and Ken, when Paul was writing My Name is Joe, he had Peter in mind for the role, and Peter had just directed his own first feature, but we knew that Peter would suit that role so well, and he wasn't famous at the time, but became famous.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, he won Best Actor in Cannes, and then his own film did really well. So it's like we interview everybody, and it's just got to be the person who's right for it. But it also, you know, with Killian, he wasn't that famous when we did The Wind That Shakes the Barley, because he had done 28 Days Later, but he wasn't sort of huge star
Mhm.
as he is now, and he was just right for the part. It's just that they're right for the part, and a lot of actors have gone on to have good careers afterwards because they're seen in a great light under Ken's direction, really. But it's Ken's directing as much as anything.
What was it like actually winning those two Palm d'Ors? Because I see all the glitz and glamour of the Cannes Film Festival festivals. Like, what was it? How can you describe it to someone who's never been there?
Well, I mean, for me, it's just amazing because it's like, um, you know, we've unlike, I mean, we've had, I think, well, with me on board, we've had like 12 or 13 films in competition in Cannes. Getting into competition is amazing because but Ken already had a reputation before I joined him.
Yeah,
So he'd already shown a couple of films in Cannes. And so he already had, as it were, a sort of, you know, they would look at his films. So when we, you know, I mean, when we went there with Hidden Agenda, I really had no idea what it was going to be like. And I was right like a fish out of water. I didn't know what to do. I mean, it's as a producer, it's a bit like organizing a wedding.
yeah.
You know, you've got to get everybody there, you've got to organize parties, you've got to organize who's going to sit where. Oh, I mean, it's just a nightmare. It's really exhausting. But we've done it a few times now. And so, and in our world, because we identify, as it were, more with European filmmakers than we do across the Atlantic. I mean, our films haven't done particularly well in the US over the years, but they've done very well in Europe, and that's where we get most of our money from, is from European funds and distributors. So we've developed relationships with different funds and distributors over the years. And in Europe, Cannes is like the highlight, and to get your film into competition is absolutely fantastic because it puts the spotlight on the film.
Mhm.
And they'd said to win, is absolutely incredible, and it's so exciting. So exciting to just get that opportunity. And I mean, I when we, you know, they don't tell you you've won. They call you, you've gone home, like we were back in London, and then you've got to, they call you to say, can you come back? You've won a prize. But they don't say what prize, because it could be any of 6 prizes, maybe. So we had to rush back for the Wind That Shakes the Barley, and we didn't know we got the main prize. But actually, somebody said to me, I think it might be the main one. And so you're there, and you're sort of in anticipation, and you go into the theatre, and you're sat in the Zamro, and you know that you've won when you don't win the prize before. So there's the runner-up prize, the Grand Prix is the runner-up prize. And then when we didn't win that, like all the breath left my body. I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It was just extraordinary. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's a, you know, it's a gold leaf really, but it's because it's a filmmakers prize. It's a jury that's put together of filmmakers, and it has such high kudos in the film world. It was fantastic to win, and then to win it twice is just amazing. So to go back again for I, Daniel Blake was incredible. I mean, didn't expect it to win it. I really didn't, but that was, and it was really, what was really special about I, Daniel Blake was we managed to get Paul there from Scotland in time. And so the 3 of us, me, Ken and Paul, were all there, and he got us both on, Ken got both me and Paul on stage for that as well. So that was amazing. It was just really special. And it's, yeah, something that I will treasure forever.
Yeah, and fully deserved. Absolutely,
Oh,
fully
thank you.
deserved.
Thank you.
Why did you, Paul and Ken, decide to set up 16 films? Was it in 2022? So 2002, sorry?
2002. Well, actually, Ken and I had been partners at a filmmaking cooperative called Parallax Pictures, but the other members of the cooperative had gradually sort of fallen our way because they were doing other things. So times had changed, and we were basically, the 2 of us were really making films together, and we were holding up an edifice in a way which was bigger than we needed it to be. So eventually we thought, right, let's just have a company together. So Ken and I set up 16 films just to make films together, just to keep making the films. Simple as that. It was simply that the Parallax had sort of run its course. And so from a practical point of view, he and I needed a base. And so we set up this office, and it's been in the same office ever since. And we've I mean, Ken's retired now, so I'm doing other films with other directors now, but and also some of the people that we've worked with, other people that have begun their careers through us. You know, 1 or 2 of them have produced films through 16 films, including my son Jack, who did a film called On Falling this
Yes,
year.
yeah. That I'm looking forward to seeing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Jack produced that, and then I've done Harvest with Athena Sangari, which is coming out in July. So we've had to sort of reinvent ourselves as, you know, make other stuff. And I mean, I have made other things, you know, whilst working with Ken, but you know,
Yeah.
the real work has been with Paul and Ken, going on a roll, keeping going. And I've done maybe, you know, 5 or 6 other films during the course of that time with other directors. But as I say, the solid work has been with Ken. I've developed other stuff with other filmmakers too, and now that is what I have to do. But it's much harder than getting a film off the ground with Ken.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, you talked about other films you've done without Ken. Was the Mr. Bean movie, was it, in
Yeah, I
97?
did that as producer for hire for Working Title. Yeah, because Ken was doing a film which he developed with Sally Hibbin, who had been at Parallax Pictures with us. And he did with her, he did Riff Raff, Raining Stones, and Ladybird. And then he did Paul Laverty's first film with Ken and Paul, which was Carla's song. But I mean, I think Ken had probably preferred to work with me. I mean, we were more in tune really, and so in the end, after My Name Is Joe, it was just us, just me and Ken and Paul really. So yeah, and while they were making Carla's song, I went off. I had to get a job, so I went off and made Mr. Bean for working title.
How was that like? Because in the sense of, I think you had to go to Hollywood at one point to film
Yeah, I
something.
did to do that. Yeah.
So how was that like? Like that?
It was very weird. It was like, well, it was for working title. My job was really sort of to keep the film being British, and we had to make it in Hollywood because that's where it was set.
Yeah,
So it was going with Mel Smith, who directed it, and Rowan Atkinson and the team to make the film there and to keep it being British whilst working under Hollywood rules. It was weird. It was good to learn. And it was interesting because Ken and I went back to LA to do a film, to do Bread and Roses later.
yeah,
So actually, it was useful training.
yeah. Indeed, yeah. I must imagine so. Yeah, and obviously, I don't know if you made contacts there or whatnot, but certainly for the future, in terms of,
It was useful. I mean, I was very happy to get out of there. I wouldn't like to make another film there. I just don't get it. It's like it's a different world. Hollywood is a different world. It really is. It doesn't.
yeah.
It's not my bag, really. I like the British independent ways.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that as well. Although I do like my blockbusters, I have to admit. Just quickly then, because we're coming to the end. What's the future for you for 16 films? Do you have any? You kind of alluded to it with Unfolding, which is a film I've heard about and I want to see about the gig economy, I believe. So,
Yeah.
what do you want to? What's the future for you
Yeah.
and everyone else in 16 films?
I mean, I think the films that we're going to make, that continue to make, are still they still have sort of similar themes, I suppose. Not necessarily social realism. I mean, Harvest isn't social realism. It's more of an allegory. It's more of a sort of fantastical film based on a book by Jim Crace, but the issues are the same. It's about refugees. It's about people who arrive from the outside as strangers into a community which is solidly built. In a way, it's similar to the old oak. It's like people accept it. It's except it's got a more of a disastrous ending to it. But it's like um, it's a week in the life of a medieval farming community, and strangers arrive, and that world is turned upside down. That's the story of Harvest. So and I'm working now on a film with Sally Potter, which I'm co-producing with her partner, Christopher Shepherd. And again, I mean, these are small independent films that, I like and try and get made. And they're not necessarily going to be the same as the Ken Loach films because they never could be.
Yeah, yeah,
But they're thematically in the same ballpark. And I'd say On Falling is very definitely in the same ballpark. And is a fantastic debut from Laura Carrera.
mm,
And it won Best Debut Film at London Film Festival and won her Best Director at San Sebastian. So, that's a fantastic start for Laura.
yeah,
And Jack and she got on incredibly well, and we'll make another film together. So he's also developing stuff. So Jack is developing stuff. I'm developing stuff um, along the same sort of lines, but not the same.
yeah, 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 the other thing. I mean, it's been incredible having you onto the podcast. Again, thank you so much because I know you're busy with a lot of things. Just thank you for coming onto the 286 Project podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Chris. It's nice to meet you, and good luck with your own stuff too.
Oh, cheers. Thank you.